Today on A Word on Westerns, we're paying tribute to two of our pals, actors who have appeared with us multiple times and who have shared other events with us. Two gentlemen who have left a wonderful legacy, and I'm talking about Bo Hopkins and L.Q. Jones, the last two main actors from the Wild Bunch. They are gone, and they passed away just weeks apart. Today we're going to be hearing from some of their friends and co-workers about maybe some of their hijinks, maybe a lot of love. Bo Hopkins worked for me in a film that we did with Hugh O'Brien. We were calling Hugh Huge O'Brien at the time.
O'Brien, yeah.
And somebody else was in that movie with Bo and Marty Cove and Huge. This man right here, Bruce Boxleitner. Bruce, what do you remember about these guys?
Thank you. Well, I worked twice with L.Q., but Bo Hopkins is a very special fellow to me because early on when I came out here, I was doing How the West Was Won. We had done the pilot, and during that time, the girl that played my sister, who I later married, and not character-wise, we got married. I have a beautiful son who just turned 41 today. Happy birthday, Sam.
Well, nice.
And anyway, she knew Bo very well. With a guy that she had gone out with. They were best friend, Robert Walden.
Walden.
And anyway, somehow, Bo was very famous for having these huge parties in the summer. He lived in this house in this very nice, kind of nice average neighborhood out in the valley. And he had Rolls Royces pulling up and parking there. People were coming out in their yards and looking. Bo was such an extrovert, but he knew everybody, you know. I have a couple of quick stories on that. He'd go, "Kid," he'd call me Kid. And he said, "Meet me out in so-and-so park out there. We're gonna throw the football around." Well, it was in the middle of August at noon. I mean, it was horrifically hot. And Bo, he's gonna get in shape. And we're gonna get in shape now because it's always that next project is coming. And, you know, I'd met him through Kitty, and I was fascinated by him, of course, because he was on so many things. I mean, I remember at that time, American Graffiti had been out, and certainly the Wild Bunch.
Kiss my sister's black cat's
You
ass.
can kiss my sister's black cat's ass. And that's when they shot him right there.
Yeah.
That was his dying words. But anyway, Bo says, "Come on out, we're gonna go do some jogging." So we're jogging around North Hollywood Park or whatever it was, and then we're gonna throw the football around. I thought it was cool because he was telling me stories about William Holden and Ernest Borgnine and Robert Ryan, Sam Peckinpah's stories, who he gave total credit to for creating his career, you know. Their adventures down there in Mexico shooting that movie. And so I was totally enthralled with that. And anyway, we'd be throwing it around. I'm going, "Hey, man, you know, we don't have any water or anything like that. We're drinking out of the fountain there out in the park, everything." And then Bo would sit down and light up a cigarette. And then we'd go out and he'd do that one and says, "Okay, let's go out there again, kid." And we'd go out there and I'd run and I'm running and I'm throwing him passes and stuff like that. It was great. Then he'd sit down and have another cigarette. Then we'd go out to the house and we'd have some beers and he'd do about half a pack of cigarettes. It was quite amazing. I thought, this somehow doesn't go together, the running and the football and sitting like we're in a bar with cigarettes and beers, you know. But he was a great guy. I so miss him. I was shocked when I heard. I haven't seen him in quite a long time. We did Return to Tombstone together, remember that?
Yeah.
And he was just a delightful guy. Yeah. And he and Marty were wonderful in that thing.
They were so good together.
Bumbling gunfighters that wanted to take Wyatt Earp on, even though Wyatt's an old man. And I want to tell you, as you remember, Hugh may have been huge, but he still had that bunt line. He could get that thing, that barrel was that long, easily 12 inches long. And he got that out of the holster and outdrew both of those guys. And both of them knew how to draw, you know.
I was hoping to have a little talk with Mr. Montgomery here.
Oh, his name is Zach. What you want, huh?
First, I want to teach him a few manners.
He's with us. He don't need no manners.
Second, I want to teach him to stay away from boozers like you two.
Now, Grandpa, you just crossed the wrong side street.
I seen that gun before.
Well, gun's a gun, kid.
No, that's Wyatt Earp's gun. Must be Wyatt Earp.
You
Wyatt Earp.
You go ahead and shoot him, Snake.
Huh?
You just go ahead.
Well, I ain't gonna shoot him. You shoot him.
Come on, make up your mind. Now, one of you's got to shoot me. Which one is it going to be, huh? You, Mr. Snake?
I was invited out to his parties all the time, even when Kitty and I had broken up. I went to about 6 of them, I think, but I'll never forget the time he introduced the golden couple arrived. Now, there was a lot of shenanigans going on. Everybody was coming out there to these things from whatever strata in the industry. And I met Farrah Fawcett there. I remember I was still very new out there, and this golden couple, everyone stopped outside, everyone's having drinks, and the music is playing, and it's crowded, and everybody turns and looks at the door, and this golden pair come walking into the party, and it's Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett. And at that time, they were on the front of every magazine and scandal sheet, you know, everything, but they were golden. And I remember I couldn't look her in the face. I was so timid of her. She was so gorgeous. And he introduced me to, Lee was terrific, and, you know, Big Valley, I was so thrilled with that. But I was looking at my shoes the whole time. I think I was so shy. And Bo got a big kick out of that. He ribbed me about that forever. But, you know, he's one of those character actors. He could do James Dean very easily. He kind of played that role in American Graffiti, you know, kind of slicking back his hair and talking like that. But he was such a great character actor, and but always the Wild Bunch. It was always about the Wild Bunch. And how Robert Ryan and Bill Holden took him aside and gave him those little tips, you know. You're talking about acting lessons. I mean, we go to classes, stuff like that, but watching it happen before your eyes, and he watched every bit of, every scene they were doing when he wasn't working too. And, so he sort of passed that on to me, you know, and I remember, and I know we all talk about the Wild Bunch.
Well, L.Q. too.
And L.Q. Another one, I peppered him with questions. We did, James Arness and I did a TV remake of Red River, and L.Q. was on that. L.Q. was a persnickety type of guy. Is that a word?
That's a safe word to use, yeah.
He was kind of, I I never quite endeared myself to him at all. He had an essence of, he was such a great actor, and he was in everything, but he had this sense of danger about him. And I sensed that he'd been around Peckinpah all that time, who was another one I met. Remember when we did that, they did that roast for Ben Johnson at the Maskers Club? Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? And then he was at the Golden Boots too, Sam.
Always. We would have been 95 next month, and his hair, he still had this long white hair.
He did. He had, L.Q. had that mane of hair still. But we had him on Red River, and he got to needling Ben Bates, who was James Arness's stunt double, who dwarfed James Arness. He was 6'8", if he was, and in cowboy boots, probably 7 feet tall. He was a massive man who had been an oil rig worker. He was a professional cowboy, rodeo, bulldogger, roper, and probably all-around bar fighter at some time. I mean, he had hands that looked like they had gone through cement walls and stuff like that, big, massive things. Anyway, for some reason, and maybe L.Q., I was, you know, I had to keep these guys apart because L.Q. would needle him about Ben had just gotten married to this very beautiful, much younger woman. And this is where L.Q., I thought, you don't want to push this man. You really don't want to. And we're out there in the desert, and everyone's hot and sweaty, and then we're freezing all night long doing night shoots. And he would be making comments. And Gregory Harrison was in there with me, and we had to get L.Q. off the set somehow, or get him around, because he had a voice. It would ring out, you could hear him in a crowd. And I think he was being good-natured about it, but I kept thinking, you're going to get your ass killed here. And they're never going to find you out here in the desert. This is a man I don't think you want to mess with. And Ben, at that time, did mostly all of Jim's riding, unless if Jim had to ride into a shot. And walking, because, he'd been, he was crippling up pretty much. And anyway, all I remember is half the time during the day shoot, where's L.Q., where's Ben? Where's L.Q., where's Ben? Because I never wanted to get them in the same 3 feet around of each other, because I think Ben would have just reached around and popped his head off. Just like that, would have gone flying up. He was a huge man, a soft-spoken man, but I guess he had words with him at one point and said, not one more thing comes out of your mouth about my wife. He was a cowboy through and through, old school. You didn't talk about a man's woman like that, and in a slightly even kidding way, and so, but I remember the last time I saw L.Q. was at the Steve Carver's, Steve Carver's wonderful book that took him 20 years to make on Western portraits.
What's amazing about that group, and we were lucky, we had about over 30 of the people in this book, Western Portraits, up on stage, and if you'll look at the group photo at the end, you see Peter Mark Richmond, he's gone. You see L.Q. Jones, he's gone. You see Bo Hopkins, he's gone. You see Steve Carver, who did the book, he's gone too.
Took him 20 years.
And at the end of the same row, thank goodness I'm not in that row, is Johnny Crawford. And we've been so blessed to have shared memories with so many of these performers that we all grew up liking. So I'm glad you're still here, but time's up for you, pal.
I'm out of here. We never know.
A Boy and His Dog, a film that has become a cult legend.
Right now I'm hungry and I want to get laid.
That's what you always say.
Next, we have Scott Conrad, who was the editor with L.Q. Jones on his film that he directed and put together. It was a labor of love, and I'm talking about A Boy and His Dog. So, Scott, we're here to talk about L.Q.
Yeah, when I heard that L.Q. had passed away, I went to my file and pulled out a letter that he had written me. I originally met him through Louis Lombardo, who was the editor on The Wild Bunch, and he and Q had worked together on several Peckinpah films. And Louis and I were finishing a movie called The Long Goodbye with Altman. And L.Q. had just fired the director and the editor on A Boy and His Dog, and called Louis to find out if he could come help him or if he could recommend somebody else to help him. And so Louis says, you want to go over and meet him? Do you want to do it? And I said, well, it was a great opportunity. So I jumped at the chance. And I go over and meet this guy. And of course, I'd seen him in films before and knew who he was. But so I go in his office. And Q's office, I don't know how many of you have been there, but it was very unpretentious, let's put it that way. And he's got his feet up on the desk, and he always had a glass of iced tea sitting there. And so he looks at me and says, well, so Louis sent you over. He thinks maybe you could help me. I said, well, I think so. And he said, well, of course, he told you that I can't pay you anything. And I go, so off my look, he sort of goes, well, almost nothing. So anyway, that sort of set the tone. And I said, well, I'd be very interested in doing this picture. We worked together for almost a year on A Boy and His Dog, and did a couple of reshoots. And he was always the most honest, sincere person I'd probably ever worked with. And this is something I'd like to read to you, if you don't mind. This was sitting when we started the final mix for Boy and His Dog at Writer's Studios. And
What year was this?
1973. So this has been on my file for a long time, and it's actually like parchment now. But so this was sitting on the console in the editing room, and I had never asked for anything like this. Just says, Scott, we've screamed at each other, fought, thought, sulked, worked our asses off. We've cut, shifted, tried, shaped, moved, worked our asses off. We've spliced and watched and listened and trimmed and worked our asses off. We've midwifed ourselves a pretty fair motion picture. A great deal of the credit belongs to you. The pleasure of your talent, dedication, interest, company, discipline, and thoughtfulness belong to us. Thank you, Q and Alvy. 1% of the profit of the movie now belongs to you. I had never asked for that. He did this out of the goodness of his heart. And he was true to his word all the way along. One of the things after he told me he couldn't hardly pay me anything was that he also couldn't afford an assistant. So he said, I'm going to be the assistant editor. I said, I don't know how that's going to work because, I'm going to have to tell you to dig the trims out of the trim bin and find this and stay here till you get it. I don't know how that's going to work. He said, listen, sweet cheeks, I can take anything you can dish out, and I've taken orders before. And he was true to the word. He did. He really could not have been a better assistant.
Really?
So anyway.
Well, when you guys were cutting the film over that year, and you'd come up with a spot, and he'd say, well, we need to shoot this, or you'd say, well, if we had this sequence, it would connect it. Did you go on location with them when they shot?
A couple of times, yeah. Mm-hmm. We did a couple of reshoots. They went back out to the desert, and I've always been of a mind, too, that I'm more valuable in the cutting room if the director knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. What was L.Q. like directing those sequences?
Well, he was good. I mean, he knew what he wanted. I mean, L.Q. He'd been around. He worked with the best of them, so he picked up a lot of good habits and a lot of good traits. And I only went out once because I figured my place is here in the cutting room. You know?
Well, he is a great cutter. He won an Academy Award for cutting Rocky.
All right.
So, anyway, thank you.
I had to share that.
I'm glad you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Wild Bunch is the Bible to many of us, and we keep losing people who have worked on it. And it's nice to have somebody who was actually there to share stories now that we've lost both Bo Hopkins and L.Q. Jones, and a stuntman who had multiple parts in that film is with us right now to share some stories. Gary Combs. Gary, thank you for coming.
Nice to be here.
So what were those rascals like, Bo Hopkins and L.Q. Jones?
Both nice guys, good actors, fun to be around. I was a stunt guy, I was an actor, so I always admired the fact that they could portray something, I mean, I couldn't do that. If they wanted me to nod or wave my hand or something, that's the part I got, but those guys could really act.
That was Bo's first movie, too.
Yes, yeah.
Were you involved in that sequence where he's got them singing the choir?
Bo was there at the very beginning. That was the first thing they shot. I didn't go down till about, I was on the last 6 weeks of the show. Sam had fired everybody else before I got there. So me and Gary McClarty and Bob Orson, they wanted some younger looking guys to be on the train as soldiers. So that's the reason I got the job. I was one of those guys. I got shot off the train.
The Army rode the railroad now.
Anyway, Bo has really finished all his stuff before I got there. I think he was around for a time when I was there, but I really didn't know Bo that much till later on. I did a couple of shows. Well, I did 6 pictures with Sam, so Bo was around on a couple others that I doubled him on one picture.
I know he was involved in The Getaway, too.
He was in The Getaway. He was, I think he was on...
Killer Elite.
Killer Elite. So that's where I doubled him, on Killer Elite. But
well, he must have been a lot thinner then.
A little bit, yeah. The last time I saw Bo, he was he'd picked up a little weight. You know?
Well, he didn't run around in the park long enough with box lightning to lose that weight.
No, in fact, I never saw him run one step, you know.
And what was L.Q. like? Because he was part of Sam's stock company of players, too.
I did 2 or 3 pictures with him, too. In fact, the picture that he directed, that boy and the dog, I was one of the guys that fought the little dog, you know. So I did a part on that, too. Non-speaking part, you know.
Well, how much did L.Q. pay you for that sequence?
I don't know, probably minimum, whatever it was. I don't remember what it was. But me and Billy Burton and Gary McClarty went somewhere up close to Death Valley on a Army base. That's where they shot it. You know, I mean, all
like
I remember,
a big junkyard thing.
Oh yeah, I remember it was hot. Oh, it was hot, and we ate in the commissary with all the soldiers and whatnot. But that's basically all I remember about that picture.
We're losing all these guys from the bunch.
Technically speaking, there's two stunt guys left, me and Mickey Gilbert. He's still around. But I don't know, but those 2 actors might have been the last 2 American actors to be on that show.
With speaking parts that were major
Yes.
parts, and I think you're right.
There might be some Mexican people from Mexico that were on the picture that are still alive, but most everybody's gone.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. Well, I'm glad you're here and got to be in a classic and work with these wonderful guys.
It was my pleasure. So, sorry they're gone.
Our guest right now is Paul, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name.
Renteria.
There it is, there it is. And you worked with L.Q. on The Hulk.
Yes. And what actually happened, L.Q. had an eye out, and he kind of like kept his eye on me, helped me out. I'm from the Pico Rivera area. It's Riverbed and Rosemead, San Gabriel. And I used to be a horse trainer. When I was fearless, I jumped on a lot of horses. And I was on a big mare, and I saw some movie lights, and I see Lou Ferrigno walking through the bushes. So the next day, I ride to the Pico Rivera Sports Arena, and L.Q.'s working. And I think he must have whispered to somebody, that guy can ride. Because this mare that I was on was 17 hands. She was bucking and kicking, worse than a stallion. And so they asked, they told me, they go, you know how to ride? I go, yes, I do. And then after 2 or 3 more days, the Mexican family started showing up and eating up craft services and wanted to touch Lou Ferrigno. And so L.Q. would ask me questions in Spanish, how to talk to these people. Or he would ask me things. And finally, they asked me, would I be security? And L.Q., I guess, recommended me, like, that guy can ride, he can speak Spanish, he's a big kid, he's native and Mexican. And of course, Mom and Dad said, no, go get a real job. So anyways, L.Q., I just found out today that he was a theater major at the University of Texas.
Yes.
Well, L.Q. did tell me, he goes, son, I was 19 years old. He goes, think about theater someday. And I never thought about that. And he says, you could ride. And anyways, years later, after 10 years, I ended up working on the railroad, working with production companies and actors, directors, producers. I guess I've never seen a good-looking Mexican like me. Big good-looking Mexican.
Well, they've seen him, but not that could ride.
There you go. So anyways, that led me into taking a commercial class and then agents and commercials and blah, blah, blah. But I just want to say, in 1991, my first play reading with some actors that we shared the same agent. I met Rudy Ramos. Rudy doesn't remember, of course, but this was like 31 years ago. And then I knew another crazy cowboy that introduced me to Bruce, Mike Moroff. He's a big movie cowboy.
Sure, I know Mike. Did you ever run across L.Q. again?
No, I didn't. But prior to his passing, now that I'm a halfway old guy, my favorite daily ritual is watching Westerns after Bonanza. And he's been on so many movies.
Oh, he is.
And
He's
so
been
that's
on a
been
lot.
incredible.
Well, thank you, Paul, for
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you, lady.
Why should I look at my picture, for Christ's sake? I know what I look like. Oh, ha! Let me tell you something, folks. Look at that. Can you see that okay? So can I.
How did you meet L.Q.?
I went to the Golden Boot pre-party 1 year, first time I met him, and I recognized his face right away. I saw him, and I met him, and then I started kidding around. I said, I quoted a scene from The Wild Bunch, which was liar, black liar, and he did along with me. And I had a great time, and he went with, and he talked to me about how the making of the Wild Bunch. And I mean, there wasn't a time, I met him about 3 or 4 times after that at different events, and he always stopped to talk to me. Hey, Lobo, how you doing? Came to the Silver Spurs award show. Great man. Bo Hopkins, I got to meet him at the Royal Cowboy meetings, and very nice man too. He was very personable also, and I mean, you know, these are people I grew up watching. I went to the movie house, got to see him. I never dreamt that one day I'd be sitting there with him or gotten to meet him and getting to talk to him and everything. So now when I do extra work, if I can get a talking line in there, I might even try to, maybe the way L.Q. acted in some of his movies is something like that.
Well, it's nice that both Bo and L.Q. were so welcoming to fans. And Lobo, thank you for sharing this.
Thank you, sir, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, gentlemen, I think it's time that you moved on. Keep on moving till you cross the border.
Oh, I told you he was wide open. Well, why didn't you shoot him?